Okay, so welcome everyone to a GLASSNET Early Career Workshop. Today we're talking careers in science. So this workshop was organized by Becker Gibson, who you see on the screen, but she's letting me do a brief intro to what GLASSNET is, who are we. So you only have to listen to me talk for a minute or two, but I'm Danielle Grogan. I'm one of the leaders of this thing called GLASSNET. And what is this? We are what's called a network of networks, meaning we're a researcher network, but we aim to connect other existing networks. And what do we do? We do, in addition to our own research, we do a lot of early career scholar exchanges. We support people traveling to visit one another. We host workshops where people talk about their research and get feedback from people across disciplines and around the world. We also host some online data sharing and tools and models. We've also run some short courses with the big focus on interdisciplinarity and on modeling. Um, and just more specifically, in case you're wondering, like, what is this acronym? GLASS is an acronym for Global to Local Analysis of System Sustainability. And this was inspired by the Land and Water Sustainable Development Goals. Um, the idea being that we need to work together and span a lot of different parts of research and the world in order to really solve these big sustainable development goals. So, as a network of networks, our goal is to connect across disciplines, spatial scales, temporal scales of research, national boundaries, and career stages, which is a big part of why you're all here. We're hoping to get, more people into this really important research and help all of you find your way through the careers that can help us understand and find solutions for sustainability challenges. If this whole networking thing sounds interesting to you, you can connect with us. We have a website, an email list. On the website, there's like a request membership piece, and of course, we're on all the various social media. Um, but without further ado, I'd like to get to our fantastic speaker selection today. And so, Becker, I will turn it over to you.
Hello, my name is Becker Gibson. I am currently working as a research assistant at the University of New Hampshire. Um, I am also a full-time student this semester and then transferring over to UNH. This workshop idea started as an looking to create an opportunity to speak to some people who may identify as early career researchers, and because there are many different pathways that we take getting into science and how we progress over the course of our careers, and it can be helpful for people getting into the field to hear from those experiences. And so I would like to introduce our first speaker, Maria. Can you introduce yourself and what you do currently? And we'll go from there.
Hi everyone. I'm now in Purdue University in Indiana, and I also work with the GTAP Center, which is a center doing modeling for international trade, policy, and we also have a big database that harmonizes a global data, economic data that is very useful. So I do a lot of data work, some modeling, some interpretation of results and things like that during my free time while doing the thesis at the same time. Yeah. So I will start. I just want to say that my career path is not the most straightforward. So I am a good case for if you feel lost, it's okay. If you don't know what to do, it's okay. You can jump around, it's also okay. Because my case study is the best in terms of this. I start with economics in my undergrad in Portugal, which is my home country. And I'm going to be honest, I did not enjoy economics back then. I'm from a small country, so there were not many jobs in economics. It was mostly private sector. And I honestly was not seeing myself to work in the company at the time. So in the undergrad, I was feeling lost. I decided to jump to a master in political science. I was very interested in political philosophy, in government and policy. So I was doing my political science, and there is this opportunity that the government gave, which is doing an international internship. And this could be anywhere in the world in any kind of institution. Could be an embassy, could be a private sector, could be anything. There was one condition. You had to say yes before knowing where you're going. And it was very dramatic. So there will be like 200 people in the conference room, and they will put your name on the screen. You had to stand up, and everyone will look at you, and then they will tell you the place you went up, and everyone could see your face. And I still remember the first person, he ended up in Algeria, and you can see just terror in his face. And when it was my name, it was Washington, D.C., the embassy. And for me, it was like, this is amazing. I never thought of coming to the US. I never thought about an embassy. It was such a great opportunity. I went to DC. I was working with the economic attaché. I was working a lot on free trade issues. At the time, there was the European Union, US free trade agreement going on. So I was part of the negotiations. I was also helping wine exporters trying to export to the US fields. I was having cases of anti-dumping, embargo in the diplomacy side. Also because the Portuguese embassy is very small, so you end up for like going to science meetings, going to agriculture meetings, going to space meetings. So at that time I was like, I prepared me to just go around at the fields and learn how to communicate about other fields that you don't know anything about it. So I would have to do reports on science meetings. And I was like, I have zero knowledge about science, but just let's transmit what I learned. So back then, I already knew that interdisciplinary learning about topics was important. To have that flexibility of talking about other topics was important. And guess what? I fell in love with economics again. So I could see so many more opportunities. I could see I could do so much more with economics. And I was next to places like the World Bank, and I saw their work, and I'm like, oh, I wish I could do this sometime. And so I decided to do a master more in economics and do the jump to the World Bank, to the trade department, and do more trade, but in a different perspective, not in the diplomacy side, but now the economic side. Being more technical, do econometrics, modeling, general equilibrium modeling. So really get into the more technical work. At the same time, World Bank is an amazing people. There are people with different topics. They love the work they do. And that's an advice, which is take advantage of the people around you. Talk about ideas, talk about their work, talk about their projects. People love to talk about their work. And if you have the opportunity to talk about ideas with interesting people, that's the best thing. It's like, it's amazing to hear about their work. People love to talk about their work in most cases. And so take advantage of it. So I was in this environment, a very competitive environment with a lot of intelligent people around me. And I was more and more working with these modelings. And that was the time where I was like, wait, I need to take a break and go deep into the more technical aspects for it. I had master, but I didn't have a PhD. And I thought that I should stop and go for the PhD. That's why I picked Purdue, because of GTAP Center is the modeling center. And I was already working with the models, but I want to work more with the models. I want to learn from inside how they build the models, how they work with the data, how they do those assumptions. And that's why I decided to do the PhD and come to Purdue. I had papers, for instance, I can give a very specific paper when COVID hit. We were one of the first people quantifying the impacts of COVID. And it was amazing to like trying to build assumptions while things were happening and trying to find, go into data sources that you normally would not go, like articles, news, tourism reports, then having these debates with like chief economists and saying like demand is going up, now demand is going down, now people are going to start buying computers, now people now are going to start buying cars now. It was amazing to be involved indeed while things were happening. So there is this a lot of need for creativity, flexibility, learning more how the models work, but also telling the story, which is very important in the World Bank. And to be able to tell a story, you need to be very knowledgeable about the tools you are working, about the assumptions you are making. Again, that's why I went to the PhD, because for me to be able to communicate with the government, for me to be able to communicate with the general public, to tell that story, I need to have a really hard base in technical skills. And I think the PhD at that moment was offering me that. Plus, I had the perspective that I know what I wanted to do. Another thing that the PhD was very useful is the soft skills. Places like the World Bank are demanding, so managing stress is a big one, right? The PhD is great to teach you how to manage stress. You have to deal with a lot of things at the same time. You are working, you are studying, you have exams, you have the thesis, you have how to communicate with your colleagues, but also the superiors and your mentor. All that is amazing skills that people in the workplaces really appreciate. How you organize yourself. Another skill that is very important is like learn how to learn things, because you normally are not going to use one tool for the rest of your life. You're going to use a big set of tools. And nowadays they change very quickly. So having that, knowing how to learn them in the quick pace and relearn them and keep learning new tools, that's a very important skill. And I think PhD is very good at that, because it gives access you to a lot of professors that are working with a lot of econometrics, modeling, partial equilibrium modelings, machine learning. So it's a really good opportunity to learn how to learn different tools in the quick pace and learning very different ones. And the workplace really care about that a lot also.
Maria, I hate to
Yeah.
interrupt, but in the interest of time, I think we'll move on to Alessandro, and I would love to hear more about from you during our Q&A session at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Alessandro Gatto from Italy myself, but currently calling from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, where I'm based, working for Wageningen Research, which is an institute, research institute from Wageningen University. And really similar to Maria, I'm also a modeler working on macroeconomics with one of the models that actually the GTAP Center has been developing. And we mainly work on sustainable economic transitions, but also ranging from a broad variety of topics, from global trade to food systems, to agricultural transitions, and so on. While I think I can share all the thoughts that Maria already put here in terms of that no career has a beginning and an end, that it's already decided and it's goes straight, and of course there is 10,000 turns that will happen along a career path. I have the feeling that my career has been quite straight. But this doesn't mean that I've always known what I was doing. So things were coming to me, and it's always I think it's always good to receive the things that come to you and elaborate them, and also throw yourself into doing certain things. So my study career started with a bachelor in economics that I studied in Italy, and finished this bachelor. I had just a brief knowledge of different realms of the world of economics, so a bit of business, a bit of marketing, a bit of finance. So I didn't really feel that I knew much, and I always wanted to. I decided to study more, take a master, but also didn't want to stay in Italy, so I moved to the Netherlands, and specifically to Wageningen University, where I'm still employed. To do a master in development economics. So I decided to focus on the first branch of economics that was most interesting to me, because I always saw economics as a way as a social tool to help people. And so I started in the development world, and I did my whole master, 2 years in studying development economics. And at the end of it, I was really fed up with the world of development economics. So what happened is that I tried within the world of development. I was also always interested in environmental economics and in sustainability transition, and I tried to combine the two in my studies, but it wasn't really working. What went strange for me is that I did my master thesis was really much a theoretical study. So basically, I studied development economics with the idea of amazing. We go travel to some nice countries and help people and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, when the thesis opportunity for doing some projects somewhere in the world came out, I decided to just stay in the library in the Netherlands and work on mathematical formulas instead of doing something else. And this, I think, was the first sign that showed a part of me that I didn't know, which is also the liking of the more theoretical work. And following that, I received the opportunity of starting a PhD here in the Netherlands as well, with the idea that when I arrived in the Netherlands 2 years before, I didn't even almost know the existence of a PhD, so it wasn't really in the back of my head. So I think briefly on the PhD, for the ones that are following us that are deciding either if to go to a PhD or not, I think it's a nice experience for me. Myself was a really great experience. I started my PhD in 2019, and COVID came right immediately after, because it was November 19. So the first months for me were terrible in the sense of being lost at work, being alone, not able to leave the house, and so on and so forth. The struggle that everybody experienced with COVID. But throughout, when you first start climbing the mountain of knowledge, at the end there is always the going down from the mountain. So I think it's a really nice experience to challenge yourself in those fields that you might think that you don't know enough. And the fear of not knowing is always going to be in research, because there is, of course, always people that know more. But it's interesting to challenge yourself in certain environments where you think you may want to interest yourself in, or you want to explore certain things. Also, an important thing that I always say to myself, and I say to PhD students, is that the path and the results of the PhD is not your PhD thesis, is not the articles that you publish, but it's only the knowledge and yourself. So you should really look at a comparison of you before and you after, because I think that's the most enriching thing of doing such a focalized experience on a specific topic. And what remains with you the most, I think it's indeed, as Maria was saying, the broad range of skills that go from just having to write down and study certain things, but also to how to outreach with other people, how to communicate your findings, how to interact, organize yourself, surf the stress that comes in and out. So this, of course, is relevant also for other types of jobs, but I think in the PhD itself, it's good because you work a lot with your head and with yourself. So it's good to remain a bit, organized in this regard. And I managed to do it in 4 years, even if I'm not managed an organized person at all. But I learned how to organize myself in this. Then the interesting thing for me, on which it feels strange for me to give advice on this, because I feel like I'm still the one that you should give advice to, because I'm also always learning in this regard, is the life right after the PhD, which is basically having to make this choice. Okay, now if before the PhD you didn't know enough about one topic, after the PhD now you know too much about one topic. And so there is the risk that somehow you are circumscribing yourself into certain fields and to certain sectors for finding job opportunities. But I think that the choice there, it's pretty much what you really value in life. And as an early researcher or as an early career, I think it's always important, given the advantage of being early and relatively young, to make choices that really are guided, let's say, more with the heart, if there is a possibility. So even when you, at the end, for example, of my PhD, I had the possibility of doing, continue doing research, continuing doing research, not at university, but at the research institute, so more slightly applied research, going into government organization or going to the private sector. So, and for me, the type of job that I do, it's really much putting an interest on top of the other, because if you decide to focalize on research and you want to do good research, then you want to do transparent research, then it's university or it's research centers. If you want to have a career in which you do research and then you develop in some management or some direction as a director or more, let's say, a managing-oriented career, for sure, at university, it's a slower path to arrive there compared to maybe the private sector or some government organization. If you want to make money, you go to the private sector. If you want to be tied to the policy making, you go probably to the government or to some applied research. But so I think the key advice here is that you have to look around. Of course, unfortunately, there is not always 10,000 jobs that we can choose from. But especially for people with a PhD, we have a valuable expertise that shouldn't scare us to also try things that are far away. And I think it's just reminding ourselves, at least in these first years of early jobs, what's really driving ourselves and what's really making us passionate. Because like it or not, we have to work in the coming 40 years at least. So at least let's align this work in the right direction with something we like. So thanks, I think, for the time being. It's better you pass on to the others.
Thank you. All right, and our next speaker, Jonas.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonas Jägermeyr. I'm in New York City with Columbia University and NASA. And I thought I'd give a quick round of how I ended up here and my career choices and decisions, but also leave room for questions. Maybe that's cool to have a little bit of an interaction and see what you're all interested in and ask specifically and then respond. So I think I keep it short. But I had a little bit of an interesting angle to this. Or let's start out with what I'm actually doing. So I'm a research professor, but Columbia doesn't call it professor because I'm not teaching or not on a regular basis. So my official title is Associate Research Scientist, which is a PI. So I'm project manager and have the same privileges and duties as a research professor, but I don't teach full time. So I have my group, and we're trying to figure out how climate change is affecting global agriculture and how we can sustainably feed 10 billion people on the planet. And again, we're running models, as many of the folks on this call, but we're running crop impact models. So we're translating climate science into impacts. What does it mean for society if it's getting warmer and drier? How would crop yields respond, and what can we do about it? And we're part of a larger consortium called AgMIP, the Agricultural Model Improvement and Intercomparison Project. And that's about 1,000 folks working in this field, interested in climate, agriculture, and modeling. And within that realm, I lead the global crop modeling initiative. So that's a fun place to be because we're harmonizing all these models and nerd out on the code and try to produce some informative results. Okay, so how did I get here? Alessandro mentioned, I have to pick up on this, mentioned climbing the mountain of knowledge. I take this literally because I'm a passionate mountaineer, climber, alpinist. And since I was able to walk, my parents put me on skis and carried me around in the Dolomites in Italy. And I was really passionate about mountains from the very beginning. And soon I learned that being out in the wilderness and in the mountains really depends on weather. And I experienced as a young child how people had accidents and actually died from lightning. We were on the same climb in the Dolomites, but turned around because the weather shifted and a storm came in, and others continued the climb. And then they were later rescued and died from lightning strike. And that was so traumatic, and that I started reading everything I could about weather, and always carried a little cloud book with me. And I was the little nerd who could tell you what kind of clouds we're seeing on the sky. And then I did an internship at the German Weather Service. So, okay, maybe that's also important to say that I grew up in Germany and Berlin, and then later moved on to the US. And then I learned, wait a second, weather is actually really boring. It's kind of like a closed science. It's a very narrow part of physics. The meteorologists don't really care about where it comes from, where it goes. So I was like, no, I want to learn, I want to be more broad and learn that climate change is the topic. It's not the weather, it's how humans affect the atmosphere and how we may run into sustainability issues. So that was eye-opening, doing an internship. And then I looked through different schools and figured, oh, geography is probably the closest subject you can do to study climate change, because when I went to school, there was no subject as climate change, and picked mathematics and meteorology as minors to get the technical backing of, to be a scientist, because studying geography can also go into the nowhere. You're studying a bunch of stuff that's interesting, but not really learning the hard science. So it's good to back that up a little bit, struggling in the math classes. And then I was squarely focused on climate change. But then in my PhD, I applied, or I got a position that was more focused on food security. And that was actually another eye-opening moment, because I learned, wait a second, climate change is just one of these different components of a larger sustainability issue. And you mentioned the SDGs in the opening, and that's where we're at. It's not just climate, it's a broad societal sustainability challenge, a generational challenge that is extremely ambitious to solve and non-trivial, because all these factors interdepend. So my interest is now focused on food, and food is linked to all these different components of sustainability, because agriculture is one of the biggest contributors to water issues, to desertification, to climate, to a lot of things. A side note is that I had a little bit of an acting career too. So in Berlin, in Germany, I was, casted as a youth, and it was like, okay, they put me in front of a camera, and I never really wanted to do that. But it was a weird experience, because part-time I was an actor and part-time I was a scientist, and never wanted to be one or the other. And being both a little bit gave me a very cushioned, comforting position, because I didn't have to choose. And it was only with my move to New York that I decided, okay, I think I'm a scientist now. I think this is cool. I think I can identify with the idea to really be a nerd and a scientist. And I was proud of it. And earlier in Berlin, I was always a little bit, I don't know if I'm a scientist, but also I don't want to be an actor either. So I guess the point is that it's fine to explore different ways of career path, and then later decide. And my final point here is that I don't think I've been the smartest person in the room. Don't be intimidated. Especially at places like Columbia, NASA, and Stanford, and, you know, very elite places, there's a lot of smart people, and it's challenging to keep up and face everybody, and you know. But I think what I was able to do is to bring with me persistence, endurance, curiosity, and ambition. And by being persistent, sit down and do your thing for a very long time, carry out your PhD, and really try to be the best in the long haul was my ticket to ending up where I am, not by being the super brain or being the, you know, it's like hanging in there and don't give up. That's I guess my number one advice when it comes to being a scientist. All right, I'll stop here and hope we have time for some questions.
All right. Next we have Bradley.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Bradley Kratzer. I am currently, well, I guess first I'm based in Washington, D.C. I'm an associate with World Resources Institute. I'm within our Climate Economics and Finance program. I'm not an economist, but my background is in development economics. So my team focuses on building the capacity of ministries of finance to manage climate risks as they plan their economies, and also on building the investment, specifically the economic investment case for adaptation. So trying to shift the narrative that adaptation isn't just great for preventing or mitigating avoided losses, but actually that there's a lot of social, economic, and environmental benefits from well-designed adaptation. I likewise will, I guess, go through quickly sort of some of my career steps and then maybe pull out some of the tensions that I have and still am dealing with. For sure, Alessandro, likewise, something you said resonated with me, where my career might so far be a little bit linear, but it doesn't necessarily, you know, I might not necessarily know what's going on, or I am still definitely answering some big questions. I feel like maybe monthly I'm like to PhD or not PhD. So it's interesting to hear some of your perspectives from those that are pursuing that pathway. So my first job after undergrad was actually as a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama. I was an environmental conservation volunteer, so I was embedded in a rural community and worked with community members to design and implement different types of environmental conservation projects in coordination with the Ministry of Environment in Panama. After which I did grad school. I studied basically development economics at Georgetown for 2 years. And I entered grad school, I think with a goal to continue to do similar sort of community level grassroots work, but quickly learns that a lot of the challenges that we all face, albeit to different degrees, are actually very much systemic and require some like national global changes. And from there, so that kind of shift that goal, I guess, a little bit, which is one of the tensions that I'll bring out. And while I was in grad school, I think I had two really formative experiences, one of which was working for El Salvador's Ministry of Economy to help integrate gender and climate considerations in the design and implementation of economic development projects. And then secondly, as an intern with World Resources Institute, or WRI, which is how I got my job. So a plug for interning for places that interest you for further down the line career goals. And then since that internship, I've been still at WRI. I think sort of North Stars or like overarching drivers of that have influenced my career pathway so far is a general interest in the drivers of poverty and inequality, and then how poverty and inequality are sort of the root causes of environmental degradation, and trying to address poverty and inequality through that lens. But there have definitely been various tensions that I think I'm still grappling with as an early career person, somebody at an earlier point in my career. The first is what I hinted at earlier, like working at the grassroots or community level versus more of like at a systems level. I think working in the like as a Peace Corps volunteer sort of showed me that there you can do a lot of great organizing at the community level, but ultimately you may, in some cases, probably more often than not, sort of encounter more systemic or institutional barriers that if you're not finding institutions, government institutions in particular, that are responsive to needs and, you know, working with policymakers and politicians that actually want to do good work and work with communities and addressing needs, you run into barriers. And so that sort of influenced me to focus more at the systems level. Another tension is like being a practitioner versus a researcher, which is one that I still very much deal with and I'm figuring out or navigating. I think it's maybe particularly hard in the development field to navigate interests in being both a practitioner, and by that I mean sort of the traditional like managing capacity building programs or development contracts versus more of the policy research side. But I found that to the extent that you're able to have your feet in both, or a toe in both, I don't know what the right saying is, but being able to engage in both worlds is really valuable. And I think that's one of the reasons why I chose to work at WRI and still do, because it's uniquely given me the opportunity to not only conduct research, but also to manage programming, which is a really valuable skill. And they're self-reinforcing, I think, being able to conduct research and manage programming in the same topic is both grounding, but also it's very grounding kind of in the real world, and then also those real world lessons inform research in a really valuable way. And then I think another tension I've dealt with along my journey so far is sort of multidisciplinary versus specialized roles or educational settings. I think there is a lot of value in like knowing one topic really, really well. But there's also a value in having a multidisciplinary perspective in education and being able to, especially in development, use a cross-cutting lens like climate and environment to touch on different facets of development. And I think cases of interest, maybe not, but one way I've been able to really do that is to focus on monitoring and evaluation. So being able to develop, execute, and manage a theory of change in the development contract world, I think has been an interesting way to bring like rigorous research methodologies into more of a practitioner world. So that's where I find myself now, and I'll stop there so we can have room for questions. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So the way that we're doing this is that you can use the raise hand feature, or if that doesn't work for some reason, you could put it in the chat, and feel free to ask any of our speakers questions. And actually, I'd like to start us off with, so I had a question for Jonas, for while still being a scientist and still figuring that out. And you've mentioned going on to a PhD program. I think what struck me was that from anyone that I've heard who has gone through a PhD program, even when they knew that they were in science or when they were pursuing that sort of field, they didn't really have an awareness of what that was. So what was that like? What was the process from going to, oh, I'm not sure what kind of pathway I'm going to pursue, to I'm going to dedicate this amount of time and resources to that kind of program?
Becker, you were breaking up on my end. I believe that was a question for me, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Sorry,
can you hear
I
me?
got
Yes.
kind of like half of it, I guess.
Okay.
What the decision process was to fully decide to commit to a PhD?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good question. So unfortunately, there's also a little bit of a path of the least resistance sometimes in starting a PhD. You know, you're going through your degree, I actually got a diploma degree, the last year of a diploma in Germany, which is the equivalent to a master's here. And then so yeah, you're thinking, well, what's next? And then you get offered a PhD position. So for many, that's actually the decision to say, you know, I can just follow on for a couple of years and take it from there. And my advice is always to say, no, don't do the path of the least resistance. You have to have a very solid reason to go for a PhD because it's exhausting. It takes up a lot of time, a lot of energy, and you can do a lot in 5 years or 4 years' time. You could start a company, you can do whatever. But don't go into a PhD just because it's, you know, it is in your path and you just go for it. My decision here was, I think, more straightforward. I knew I want to be somewhere in the science world. I think it made a lot of sense for me to get a PhD because even if I wouldn't end up as a professor sometime until the rest of my days, I would still want to be in that area of doing research and being really data driven and know the details. And I was enjoying it and I was good at it. So that was clear, at least the PhD. And then after that, it was yeah, more vague where I want to end up if I do a postdoc or take a turn and yeah. But I think my hesitation was that, you know, you look at what you have and where your skills are, and I thought, well, sitting down and nerding and writing code is not what my core skill set is. I can do that for a while, but there's probably people that can do that much better. And I also can work with people, and I enjoy working with people, and I have more skills than just staring at a screen all the time. So I think that was one of my hesitations to say, do I want to give this up for a large part and really, you know, sit down for 5 years and nerd out on my numbers? And then I realized being a scientist is actually more than just staring at your screen. So there is a big component of team working and being creative and designing studies and collaborating and going to conferences and speak and interact. And honestly, this is probably my favorite part of the job. I do like to have a day where I have nothing else and I can focus on a scientific problem and code it in and find the results. But doing that exclusively, I don't think I'm the perfect fit. I can do that for a little bit. But yeah. All right, let's stop here.
It looks like we have two questions. I can see someone has asked, thank you for sharing. I would like to ask, what is the main factor that influenced your current career path choice? And does someone feel interested in responding or drawn to responding?
Maria, do you feel like responding to this?
That's a hard question, right? Normally, there is not one factor. There is a lot of them. For me, I feel, and I'm going to repeat a bit, the people around me have a lot of influence. Because if I have someone that is very interesting and passionate about something, I admire that a lot, and it pulls me forward. So if someone is like knows a lot of modeling and is very good, and I can see what he does, I look at them and I'm like, oh, I wish I could be like that one day. And that for me, it's like a driving force a lot. I don't know if it's the only one, but is an important one to just admire someone that is doing good work, and you'd like to be somehow like that one day.
I can add a little bit to the main factors influencing. Growing up in Berlin in Germany, money was not a thing. It was, in a German society, you're well taken care of, and if you're in a middle class environment, you're not really, thinking about having big lifetime savings, necessarily. So I wanted to do something meaningful. That was one of the big reasons why I wanted to do research in science, is because this is something how I can contribute to society. But then honestly, things change a little bit when you move to a place like New York. Obviously, you're also progressing in your career, and it's time for family planning and those kind of things. So money becomes more important. And if you are paying 4 times for rent than you do in Berlin, all of a sudden you question your situation a little bit. And it's like, why am I working my ass off like this for a salary that is not competitive? And that became more important in my planning too. But I found a way to balance those things. And I started consulting in industry more, as a little bit of a side gig. And I think that also answers the second question a little bit, going back and forth between private and public sector. I think there's merit and there's co-benefits in doing that, because there's a different drive and a different attitude in industry. And having a little bit of exposure, having a foothold in industry, learning how things go there, and then apply that in your academic environment, I think is very beneficial. To not, sit back and write a paper for 3 years and then drop the bomb, but move a little bit faster and refine later, I think is also beneficial. And there's a way you can set yourself up between industry and academia to balance your expenses and also your attitude and what you want to get out of it. And that's what I did. And I think for me, that's a working solution.
I mean, I can add a bit in the second question, and I'm going to be honest here. It's not easy going from work to PhD. For instance, I'm the oldest of my cohort. There is that age difference a bit, so, and it weighs on you. The wage also, I was having a good wage in Washington, D.C. with everything happening around me. My wage in Indiana is not so good. There is not much things to do. And those things, yeah, I mean, there are more bad moments where you feel a bit disconnect. That's true, and you should be aware of it and realize it. But you also see the good things about it. I have much more perspective than probably my colleagues. I understand what is after a PhD, so I'm able to take more advantage, what kind of skills the workplace is looking for. I can target and I can learn them very much better. I also take more value to do the PhD because I have the work experience, so I end up for appreciating a bit more than just going school all the time, because after a while you get a bit sick of school. And I was working before, so doing the PhD, I'm not that sick of school, so I'm enjoying it again. I'm having fun. I'm studying again, and it's great to have opportunity to have the time to study again. So definitely there is pros and cons. Just be aware of the cons, but take advantage of the pros for sure. Yeah.
I have a question for, actually, did we get, nice. I have a question for Bradley and Alessandro, just to get some, just to ask some speakers who haven't answered questions yet. Have you found any either professional groups or maybe special interest groups, like maybe even if it were like a recreational, like a hobby or you either build skills or have inspired you, just in the theme of networks and anything that brought you some of the connections that you feel like have been useful for your career.
I can start. Sorry, you were breaking up a bit on me, so let me rephrase the question. So, if we experienced something outside the academic world that gave us a bit of networking for the academic world, or within the PhD path, you mean, or in general? If
In
something
general.
not work, yeah, something not work related contributed to working environments. It's a good question because I have the feeling that at least with the modeling world where we come from, it's also a closed kind of world in the sense that there's not many modelers in the world, and the ones that are there, you know each other's quite soon. The moment you start doing some multidisciplinary things, and so I think that most of the networking that was that I built, at least in within my career, it was coming from inside the career. I'm also a person that, in my specific case, has interests that are not really related much to work, outside work. So I don't go and have coffee with with other economists. It's people I try to avoid. No, I'm joking. But it's in general, no, I never had the opportunity of finding such connections. It would be nice. I mean, I think the interesting thing is that outside work you get basically confronting other people. You also get the idea of how to frame your work from different perspectives. So you also, since I think a really key part for researchers, it's how to come across to get out of the office and throw your results into the real society, to talk to real people and address real needs. And I know that there is excellent researchers that have really poor communication and social skills, which basically compromises the excellency of their research because they just do not know how to spread it around. So I think also talking informally to people about what you do, or in general, it helps to have a broader perspective on the stuff you do. And also I think especially in research, it's always good to have a different perspectives on what you do, not necessarily on the methods, but more on for example on writing papers, or on communicating with the stakeholders within one project. So because most of the times it's also that, at least me personally, I work pretty much. Our research center is a consultancy, so we have clients that spread from all sorts of backgrounds. So it's good that also this type of language and the way dialogues starts, it goes according to the people that you talk to, and I think it's a good skill to have in general.
I can say briefly, I'm also not a very good networker, sadly. So I don't really engage too much with like sort of formal like networking events outside of work. But some things that have been really helpful for me are like using LinkedIn to identify alumni from the universities that I am personally an alumnus at, to connect with people that are working on similar issues or organizations that are of interest. And also people that have worked on different papers or research efforts, coming across them on LinkedIn, reaching out to talk about what they do or sort of how they're working on similar issues has been really helpful, not just to learn about how different organizations are approaching similar issues, but also, I guess primarily that. So.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you to all of our speakers for speaking. And please take out please, if you have the time, you can fill out the feedback survey that I believe Holly posted in the chat. It'll just help us with getting feedback for what we've done today and give us an idea of what people might be interested in for the future. Thank you.